Welcome to the Marketing Mastermind, a podcast designed to elevate your entrepreneurial mindset and help you take your business to the next level through digital marketing. Join your host, agency owner Hillary Russell, as she interviews experts from around the world, dives into business success secrets, and gives tactical mindset training to help you elevate all areas of your life and business. Ready? Let's dive into another Marketing Mastermind episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Mastermind. Today's topic is all around branding. And those listeners, coming into this episode, I know you've got one, two, maybe multiple businesses that you're running. And one of the most common, questions that we get as digital marketers is, where do I start for my branding? And I think that that's kind of a loaded question almost, right? So I'm really excited to bring in a special guest today, Jolie Goodson, who, let me tell you guys just a little bit about her really quick before we bring her in. I'm so excited, guys, because she is the creator and the host of Branding Matters, which is a podcast dedicated to helping marketers, business owners, and entrepreneurs who create brand equity and increase profit, which we love, right? This podcast was also named the 10 Best Branding Podcasts in Canada, which is so cool. So many, it sounds like you guys have won so many awards for the podcast as well as being a proud ambassador. Jolie's a proud ambassador of Gems for Gems, which is a charity dedicated for helping victims of domestic abuse to empower themselves. So incredible. Jolie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm really, really excited to be here. And I just want to congratulate you on your podcast, because as from one podcaster to another, I know how challenging it is, but also how rewarding it is. And so I listened to a few of your episodes, and it's great. And so congrats to you for yours.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that means a lot. Thank you so much. That means a lot, especially where, you know what you're doing in the podcast space. So
yeah, right.
That's really cool. Yeah. So Jolie, tell us a little bit. I want to just dive right in to, and I'm always interested when, I've got a new guest, new individual, an amazing person that I get to meet. I'm always interested in, how did you get here? Right? How did you get into branding? Because, and I always joke too with like these types of careers and, passions that we develop. When you were a little girl, did you just say, man, I can't wait to grow up and be a branding specialist?
Right? Does anybody know? You know what? Full honesty, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I grew up. I still don't know. I'm just kidding. I went to university. I studied psychology. I've always been interested in people, and a lot of, it's funny, you pick up any sales book or any marketing book and people ask me like, oh, is your background in sales or marketing? I'm like, no, it's psychology. But you pick up any psych book, Psych 101, and really it's a sales book, and it's all about what makes people tick. What's the why? How do you motivate? What inspires and motivates people, right? So I've always been interested in that and people and stuff. So just regular degree. And then I actually went traveling for a few years after university, took off and traveled all over the world, and came back, and I was like, now what? And my family's in advertising, pardon me, my brother. And so he's like, oh, you've just traveled and you're creative and you should get into advertising. Literally, I was like, okay. So I was like, all right. And I, like everything in life, I just jump right in. And so I started off as my career as a copywriter, and I worked in the advertising world for 6 years. I worked at a couple of agencies, and I liked it, but I didn't love it, And so got to a point where I was at the agency where I thought was the best in town, and I still wasn't really where I wanted to be. So did a whole career change. And through talking to people and networking, I got into the world of swag. So basically, I've been there now for over 20 years. I've been with the same company for going on. I just celebrated, I think, 21 years with them. Long time. Started when I was 10. And so we do all branded merchandise, right? So I help corporate clients create brand awareness through swag, jackets, hats, all that kind of stuff. And been doing that for a long time. Love it, love it, love it. And then how I got into this and calling myself the branding badass and my podcast is back when COVID first hit. I think COVID affected a lot of people, right? And so I was supposed to do a presentation. It was supposed to be in person to this online women's group. It was an online women's networking group, and it was about branding. And it was funny because at the time they had to switch it. It was September, and it was September 2020, and they wanted me all of a sudden to do it on Zoom now versus doing it on in person. And I'm one of the, I love people, so I love presenting and doing talks in person because I love feeding off the energy of the audience, and I love humor and stuff. So I was like, oh my God, I got to do it online. Like, who does anything online back then, right? So I was almost going to cancel. And then I decided my boyfriend was like, well, you can't cancel, you committed. So I ended up doing this presentation. There is a point to this whole story. Sorry if it's taken long.
No, I'm excited to hear it.
So I ended up doing it online and talked a lot about, because I have a advertising background. I've always, I've learned through my career the concept of what it means about having a good brand and brand story and brand purpose and, all those things, brand identity. So after my presentation, I had different women come up to me separately who basically said they really enjoyed it. And like, they messaged me and they said they really enjoyed it. And because of COVID, they both, same story, forced entrepreneurs got laid off from their careers in the corporate world and started their own business. And they knew what they wanted to do as far as a business goes, but they had no clue about what it meant to have a brand or how to create a brand or what it even means in branding. And so they asked me if I did consulting, and I wasn't doing consulting. And I'm a single mom, and I'm busy with my volunteer with work and no free time. So I was like, well, I don't do consulting, but what do you need? And so I kind of gave them some pointers separately. And then I told my boyfriend about it, and I said, should I do consulting? Like, what do you think? I go, I don't have time, and I don't know if I want to. And then he is a huge podcast listener. He loves soccer, and he listens to all these soccer podcasts. So he's like, well, why don't you start a podcast? And I was like, okay. First I was like, as if, and I knew nothing, but I thought, if these are two women in Alberta that were both laid off from their corporate world and starting their own businesses and becoming forced entrepreneurs, COVID was a global situation. And so this is a global issue, and there's a lot of forced entrepreneurs around the world. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I can do this and help people. So my motivation was I can help people on a grander scale. And I know what I know what my strengths are, but I also know what I don't know. Yeah. And I thought, if I can bring on experts from all over the world, from all different industries, and share, their stories, but also offer some valuable branding tips to help my listeners, then maybe I got something. And literally came up with the name Branding Matters because it's that double entendre of, all things to do with branding. So from creating a brand identity, like I said, to swag, to everything branding, but also branding really matters. Like when you have a business, before you go out there and try to sell your business, you have to figure out what your brand is and what is your purpose and what are you trying to, tell people and help people. So that's how it came. And then I came up with the Branding Badass as my new branding name, just to practice what I preach, stand out from your competition and be different and get noticed and all those things. And here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible story. I think that resonates quite a bit too. I mean, it does with me, but I'm sure with, so many different entrepreneurs out there right now, because you're exactly right. I mean, on one hand, I don't think that for most of us, at least, I don't think that we end up in the business or the career that we, always thought we would. It's usually something that evolves over time. And we're like, oh my gosh, wow, this is perfect, right? Because we follow our passions and our dreams. But on the other side of that too, talking about coming across those, couple of women and individuals that were starting their own businesses because of the effects of the pandemic. You're absolutely right. I mean, that caused such a huge shift in not only the, safe, stable, secure jobs that a lot of us had at the time, but also the way that businesses were doing their marketing, their branding, their outreach, right? So a lot of individuals, whether it was a company or an individual with their own career, had to make different shifts. So such a cool story of how you started that out and now have built such a phenomenal podcast and an incredible brand.
And I love it. I love it. And it comes very naturally to me because I don't know if you feel this way, but I'm a very inquisitive person. I ask questions. My boyfriend laughs. He's like, on our first date, I had the proverbial clipboard, asking all the questions. I mean, I'm naturally I'm very interested in people. And so I think that's a big thing, is that it's really come easy to me because I love it. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, absolutely. I think same thing for me. I never imagined. In fact, I even share sometimes with the students and entrepreneurs that I coach that for years and years and years, I knew that I didn't want to be stuck in the corporate world, which I was for a long time, right? I
Mhm.
didn't want to be uh, kept complacent in that version of the quote American dream, right? But I didn't know what that entrepreneurial journey would look like for me. I had no idea where to even start. And then honestly, and it was actually around the same time frame, right when the pandemic hit, I had a 3-month-old little boy at the time. I just had a little baby boy. And it was like everything all at once. I was like, man, I cannot go back to a 9 to 5, living this same life, missing out on my little boy's life and settling for, you know,
Yeah.
my
And I
version of
think a lot of
mediocrity.
people feel the same way,
Yeah,
right? That's
right.
pandemic does, I mean, this can be a whole other topic, but I think it has affected people in that way where they're taking a look at their lives, and saying
Mhm.
like, do I really want to do this? Like the world, everything changed. And so people are questioning
Yeah,
what they're doing. And so there are a lot, I don't know what the statistics are, but there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there because of COVID. And
right.
so I'm hoping that I'm helping them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that that's an interesting thought. It kind of forced all of us to think and kind of reflect a bit of like what is
Yeah.
important to you and are
Yeah.
you going to do something about it? Right?
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so I want to maybe get into a couple of the tactical sides of this, right? Because the majority of our audience, like I said, entrepreneurs, individuals that are looking to start their own business, or maybe they've started one and are pretty far into a mature business that they're running, right? I think regardless of the journey of your business stage, though, branding is such an important key piece. And I want to give you a couple of hard questions here.
Uh-oh.
Well, probably not
No,
hard
that's
for
okay.
you. It's
No, no,
stuff
no.
you talk about every day, so it's probably not hard for you. But I would say that one of the most common questions that we get from, and I run an agency, but we do more kind of all across the board marketing, right? So we actually don't do a lot of branding. Funny enough, we usually work with other companies to do that. But the companies that do come to us that are concerned or maybe they're launching even a new product or a new service, there's a lot of branding that needs to go around that as well as around a new company, right? When you're starting out a new company. So this is my loaded question: where do you start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to preface by saying, I call myself the branding badass. When I work with my clients, like I said, my specialty is working with creating brand awareness through different swag and marketing
Mm-hmm.
merchandise. So there are companies out there that just work on branding. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, having my podcast and having the experts and doing my own research, I've learned a ton over the last year and a bit. So what is important for everyone who's listening is before you even do that and figuring out what your brand is, there's a famous saying, you've probably heard it, Jeff Bezos, where, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Your brand is your reputation. You don't have control over your brand. But what you do have control over is your branding, because your branding are the actions that you do and that you take to inspire. And this is where my psychology comes in, where your actions to inspire and motivate your potential clients and your audience to find you and to fall in love with your brand and then to choose you first in your category so you become top of mind, right?
Mm.
And I will just expand on that with the pandemic. There was also a huge influx of everybody on social media, right? I mean, LinkedIn, if your audience isn't on LinkedIn, everybody should be on LinkedIn, FYI.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn, there's been a huge explosion, all social media. And so everybody's now fighting for attention, right? And it's digital saturation. And we're all on social media and we're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So what's going to stop the scroll? Right. And then it's one thing to stop the scroll and get people's attention. And that's marketing, right? You know, that's your thing, is like how to do marketing. But then branding is, how do you connect with that audience? So now they've stopped the scroll because you have a pretty picture or you have something that's engaging. Now, how do you connect with them? Because branding is all about connecting with like-minded people who share a lot of your same values, and then getting them to like you and start following you. And then when you have something to offer, whether it's a service or product, they want to do business with you. And that's what branding is all about. So to back up, so your brand is really your reputation. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. When you think of the world's biggest brands, like you think of Apple, you think of Nike, you know, these are brands that are consistently doing the same thing, the same messaging. And then over time, we've learned to trust them. And trust, as you know, is huge in business. So it's figuring out what your why is. You know, if you're a business and you're a business person or an entrepreneur and you're out there listening, and, you know, you have something that you want to sell. First of all, back up and ask why. Like, why do you want to sell? What's your purpose? What do you want to achieve other than making money? Right? If you take money out of the equation, what's your purpose for doing it? And now more than ever, because Gen Z's out there, and you probably have a lot of Gen Z's listening, they're entering the marketplace right now. And they have a whole different mindset than, you know, the old generation. Believe it or not, the old generation is millennials. I'm the Generation X, so I'm before that. But, you know, the Gen Z, the millennials were the Uber generation, right? They were all about all the apps and everything quick. Now the Gen Z's, they're really, what's important to them is, you know, is it eco-friendly? Where is it sourced? What's the purpose behind it? What are you doing to give back? And so brands are now, and businesses and companies are now having to really like let people behind the curtain and let them see what they're doing. And then they decide who they want to do business with. So does that answer your question? I know I kind of put a lot in there, but
no, that does.
Figure out your why.
Right. Yeah. I think that I love that, because honestly, like there's a lot of ways that you could have taken that answer, right? Like, I mean, there's so many different things that go into building a brand and how you're going to represent that brand and, you know, all of these different pieces. But I love that you said, you know, come back to your why. And I think that you're spot on as well with the way that consumers are choosing the businesses that they decide to work with. Right. And I actually was having a conversation just last week about something very similar. And this is the conclusion we came to, was that whether it was, you know, whether it's the new generation that's coming in, or if it was kind of an effect from the pandemic of making us realize like, hey, we got to focus on what's important to us. Right. Or whatever that might be, consumers now don't really care about your features and benefits. They care more about your values. And if they align with you, that human connection, if they can align with your company, with your brand, with you as the business owner, even on those, you know, value points. So that's really cool that you brought that up.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So this is an interesting one, and I'm excited to hear your take on this. Being in the marketing space, we do a lot of, you know, I mean, digital marketing is anything online, of course, and you can get creative there, but everyone is doing digital marketing, right? So there's some ways that you can create points or create touch points with your clients that are physical, right? Through physical goods or branding, you know, swag, different things like that. So I'm curious, what are some unique or creative ways that you have seen companies use swag or, you know, branding, promotional items even, to get in touch and build that relationship and that trust with their clients?
Well, first of all, yes, I'm all for swag, and I think that's really on an individual basis as far as swag goes, and I'll get to that. But I think what I want to touch on is, you talked about when you first started your question, you asked about what makes you stand out, right? Compared to all your competition. So what I say to people is, figure out so once you figured out your brand and you figure out your business and you figure out who your market is, because that's the other thing too, is make sure you know who you're talking to, who is your audience. Then find out, it's so important to know who your competitors are, right? So I always say, figure out who your top 3 competitors are, because chances are there's other people that do what you do. Whenever people say, well, there's no one in my who does what I am, I'm like, really? Yeah, there's no other real estate agents in your city? I don't know about that, right? I find that a little surprising. But no, so find out who your like top 3 competitors are, and then check them out, right? Go on social media, check out their website, check out what they're doing, check out their swag, check out everything that they're doing, and then try to find something that they're not doing that there's a hole there, and you're going to fill that hole, that missing piece, and then lean into that and use that to do your branding. Right. So then you're going to become unique in that sense. And I always say too, like, be yourself, whether you're a solopreneur or you're a small business owner, really be authentic. And I know that term is used all the time, but don't try to be somebody else, right? Don't try to be the guy down the street because he's doing really well. Be yourself. So if everybody's zigging, you want to zag, because that's going to make you stand out. And then if you lean into what they're not doing, because they can't do everything. They can't be all things to everybody. So find that little, piece that they're not doing, and then use that to leverage your own brand and do your own marketing, and then your swag can be based on that or whatever else, because I think that's what's going to make you stand out. When especially again back to social, when you're scrolling on social and everybody, it all looks the same and it all blurs in, but when something totally is different, whether it's a picture or video, that's what's going to stop the scroll, and then you're going to be intrigued to look at it. And then, like I said, that's the marketing part, because it stops you, but then how you are authentic and how you share what you're trying to share, I think that's what's going to bring people in. So, and that was that was another impetus for me starting my podcast, is because I really started seeing people on social and everybody was just buy my product, buy my service, sell, and not understand. You probably know this, understanding what it means, as far as attraction marketing, right? Is like draw people in, push them away, because when you start, 50% off sale deal, people are going to just tune you out. So yeah.
Yep, you're exactly right. Yeah, it's so interesting that you use the term attraction marketing. That's what it is. Like, you have to be human, and especially in our digital world now, you have to really lean on those aspects that make you human, that make you unique, and that really, align with your values. It's an interesting concept too, because I think that for a lot of individuals, I know for myself, I've been in the marketing space and helping companies and brands for 10 plus years, and have also helped many entrepreneurs with their businesses and growing and expanding those, including my own. And it's so interesting that at the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey, you hear all these things like lean into your why, and, be unique, and lean into these things that make you unique and special. And you hear those, but you're like, I don't know, that doesn't seem to work. And you try all of the different things that don't work. And then you come back to, oh yeah, lean into your why, be yourself, be unique. Right.
Absolutely. And, one thing we haven't touched on, I don't know if you're going to bring it up, so I'll just bring it up.
Yes.
I think a lot of times for entrepreneurs, whether they're consultant again, or small business owner, is the idea of pricing, and especially if you're selling products and it becomes commoditized, and then how do you decide on pricing, and there's margins and everything else, right? Well, it's really important, because when you have so again, it takes time, because when you build that relationship and when you've created that trust with your consumer, then we all are very mindful of pricing, obviously, but you don't want to ever sell yourself on price, right? You never want to be the cheapest in town. And I say this, I read a really good book where the author, he was actually a guest on my podcast, David Averme, wrote this great book, and he talked about the 4 most dangerous words in business. Do you know what they are? If you were to guess?
Well, using context clues here, is it we can do it cheaper?
Well, that's great. No. So the 4 most dangerous words in business are all things being equal.
Oh, interesting.
Because all things being equal, right? If you and we both have the same product that we're selling, the same service, and everything's exactly the same, then what is going to make the consumer choose you over me, or vice versa? Who has a cheaper product, right? Because that's all it's based on. But if you have other things that I can't offer, that you offer that I don't, and that's that unique part of your business. You talked earlier about making yourself different. If you can lean into something that no one else can offer, and it doesn't have to be a product, because I sell t-shirts and jackets and hats, and everybody else does too, right? But what I try to bring as far as value goes is my expertise in my background with my advertising and my branding. So when I work with clients, I provide them with this whole service to make sure that they get the value, and I say to them, you can probably get this t-shirt down the street, $10 cheaper, but and then sometimes people leave and they come back because they're like, no, people want to feel special. They want to feel, like you said, the value. If the value's there, then you can take price out of the equation. I think that's so important because people underestimate their value and they undercharge and they, all that kind of stuff. So I just want to, because you said you have a lot of, new entrepreneurs, people listening. I think that's a really important to think about, is the value that you're providing.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said that. That is a good point. And to, be confident in the value that you provide and the price that quantifies. Don't undercut yourself, because I see that as well with, different companies and businesses that we work with, that they tend to think, well, if we do a cheaper price, more people will buy. No, actually, right? Would you want a $1,500 car, or would you want a car that's, $30,000 that is going to run for a while, right? There's value, perceived value in the cost of something as well.
Exactly.
And your value, quantifies, lean into how much you're worth. That's
for
all.
Sure. And one more thing, sorry, I want to add on that too. I'm giving you a little peek behind the curtain, but I have a guest coming on that I had an interview with, and he's an expert. But one thing he said too was, which I found really helpful, is because a lot of times how do we define value? What does that even mean? And he basically summed it up and said, when your client leaves what you've brought to him better off than before he met you. So, I mean, I'm not articulating it as well as he did, but basically if you've improved his situation, then there was the value in that, right? Yeah. Doesn't matter how much time you spent doing it. Doesn't matter anything. All that matters is if he came to you with a problem and you improved his situation and solved his problem and gave him more than what he expected, then there's value in that. And that's how you sort of decide whether or not there was value in it. Because, think about people, I'm not going to shoot any careers under the bus, but people who charge by the hour, right? And they can spend 10, 20, 30, hours and more on something. But at the end of the day, was the condition improved after? So that, ask yourself that when you're working with your clients is,
right.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah. I like that a lot, because I think that, so this is a topic that comes up a lot too with new entrepreneurs, right? Is that imposter syndrome, right? And I think tied to that, and where I'm kind of connecting this, is with that imposter syndrome kind of coming back to like, well, am I even providing value? Am I even doing, am I even worth this? Am I worth their time? But this is such an incredible perspective. So I'm really glad that you brought it up, because you're right. I mean, that's a really clear, easy way to look at it and say, yes, you're improving their experience, you're improving their, where their, where their baseline is even, right? And making those improvements, that justifies your value.
And to bring it back to branding, when you do that, then that person, that customer is going to go out and tell people about you, and that's going to drive business. So that's where the brand, your reputation is being created. So every time you do that, you're getting another, loyal fan. You're turning, customers into loyal fans, and they're going to go out there and they're going to be your best brand advocates and go out and share their experience with you. And branding is all about experience with other people. And then you're going to grow your business, and it's all going to be based on your reputation, which is your brand. So to bring it full circle.
Incredible. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, awesome. So what would you say in your line of work and with the clients that you're working with, what is the most common mistake that you see being made?
In my world, like as in merch, branded merch.
Oh, sorry, with your coaching.
Oh, well, I don't do coaching. So that's what I'm saying.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I have my podcast, and then I have my swag that I do. So
I'm sorry. I thought.
Yeah, that's okay. I know. That's why I just want to be, I'm very transparent, right? And I want to be, so, yeah. but I would say the biggest mistake is just what we talked about is I think people undercharge and they
Mm,
undervalue themselves. And statistically, I hate to say this, but women do it more than men, which is terrible.
yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy.
Yeah. So I think it's that. It's really, I think it's, when you have a business and you're passionate about it and everything else, and you know that there's that value there, and you can also back it up, right, with metrics. I mean,
Mhm.
there also has to be some data to back you up when, you're going to meet new clients. But I think that's the biggest, that's what I see is people, people are trying to undercut, and so they tend to not charge what they're worth.
Hmm.
What do you think? I mean, you do
Yeah.
coaching as consulting. Would you say for your business, that's what you see?
We do see that pretty often.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it is interesting too that, I mean, you brought up that statistically women are doing that more often than men, which is an interesting topic in and of itself. Um, but it's interesting. And I think it probably does come back to that, imposter syndrome, which is essentially, lack of confidence in these certain areas and really just not knowing what you don't know at that point, right? I feel extremely passionate about making sure that as an entrepreneur, whether you are male or female, right, starting out, that you know your worth, right? That you know what it is that you add to the table or what you bring to the table, and that you are, you know, compensated for that, whether it is
Yeah.
in respect or time or whatever that might be, right? I think that as an entrepreneur, even a professional in the space, right, um you have to hold those boundaries for yourself that you deserve to have that level of respect, that level of compensation, that level of, whatever it is based on the value that you're providing,
Yeah.
right?
And I think yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think it's great because look, I've had imposter syndrome. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even tell you my whole story of, ups and then downs, and it's been a journey, but I've had some pretty low lows, and I've definitely have my confidence been shaken. And I think everyone feels that way at one point or another. And I think a great way to get over that is, especially if you're a new business or you've been in business for a while and you're just trying to take the temperature of where you're at, you know, do surveys and ask customers, because that is the best feedback. I think when you survey your customers and you get the and you can do it blind too, so they don't have to say they are. You can send out, a survey, but just certain questions that you want to know and feedback. But that's also really good. Back to talking about branding and marketing and everything. It's great to use, and I'd be curious to get your point of view on this. Is to use customers' testimonials to promote
Mm-hmm.
yourself, because you can tell the world how great you are, and you can tell the world that you're trustworthy and you have the best widgets and that your service is awesome. But when you have people, like I said, your advocates, your brand advocates, and your loyal fans that are out there doing that for you,
Mm-hmm.
that's golden, right? And so you can use that to your advantage. I always post whenever I get a great review on my podcast. I'm always posting it on social media, and because I like it, but I also want to show people like this is what other people are saying. Don't take my word for it, right? So it really
Yeah.
works in your favor for so many different ways. And it's
Mhm.
also, at the end of the day, it's a bit of a confidence booster. So if you're feeling kind of crappy, can I say crappy on your podcast?
Yes. Yeah, we're saying badass. So yes.
Okay. I don't think badass is a bad word, but and we can
No,
talk
I
about
don't think
badass in a
crappy is.
second. But yeah, so I think it's also a confidence booster, and
Yeah.
you also have to be, strong enough that if you get some criticism, but it's
Yeah.
in a positive way, that it only helps you get better, right? It helps you grow. I'm always asking for feedback, good or bad, because I'm a work in progress. My show is a work in progress, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to be better every single day. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep, that's such an important piece. I was actually in a leadership training. It was over a year ago now, but has stuck with me and it was so impactful. Basically, the training was learning to take feedback more, in a more productive way almost. Because if someone's giving you feedback, if they're willing to give you feedback, that means that they care enough to see you improve, which is a
totally.
positive thing,
Yeah.
right? But they use the example of when we're in a flight, like, flying somewhere, that 80% of the flight, the pilot is off course. And the ground control is the one that is calling him and saying like, hey, you are 5% off track to the right, and he just simply says corrected, right, corrected, and is back on track. He doesn't take it personally. It's like, well, well, why did you say that? Like,
Yeah.
and get all personal about it.
Exactly.
It says corrected.
Yeah.
And, and I think that as leaders and even individuals in our personal lives, like that's such a great perspective when we're receiving criticism, even creative
Feedback. Yeah.
criticism or feedback, right?
Yeah.
That it's simply just a way to improve those things that we are trying to become in our
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. For what I want to comment on that though, because
Please,
also
yes.
with all that said, I also think, especially again on social media, you're going to get haters, right? So you have to consider the source, right? If you're on social media and you're someone and you have a brand or a business and you're saying things and people are criticizing you and saying things, consider the source. It's not a you thing, it's a them thing. So
Yep.
that's why I'm saying, like, if you do these surveys for customers or people that matter to you, or even mentors or people, whoever that you're going to gain something from that, those are the ones you listen to. All the riffraff and everybody on social media, don't worry about them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I'm really glad that you said that, because you're right. Yes.
Yeah.
And what is your take on that? Because like my opinion is that when you start getting these haters right online, that's when you've really made it, because
I've heard that.
you're pissing off some people, and that means that you're attracting the right types of people too, right? That you're attracting the people that are going to align with you. And if they disagree, if they're one of those haters, that's okay. We don't want every single person to come in, right? But I think that in taking feedback and in taking advice, or taking, basically deciding where that line is, you got to disregard the things from people that you have no connection to or no emotional connection to. But consider the advice of, or, the feedback from those that have either done what you're trying to do or have your best intentions, at heart.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. It's funny you said that about, they say when you have haters, you've made it. And I hear that all the time, and I hear people talk about that. I don't know, maybe they're out there, but I've never had any haters, like, per se on my, like, social media. I've never had any. Now, I don't know what that says. Maybe I haven't made it yet. I try to be, and again, there's so many topics to go through, but I'm also not very controversial on my social, right? I try to, when I tell this to people, when I do my presentations, when you're doing a post, I always say, be very thoughtful about your post. So this, because this is, you talked about touch point. This is a touch point to your brand. So my brand, what I want people to think about me is I always say, my middle name is fun. I like to have fun. I'm easygoing. I'm like, I don't take myself too seriously, and I don't take things too seriously, because it helps me get through my life, because I've had some shit happen, pardon my French. And so when I'm on social media, there's this rule, like, before you post, ask yourself, so what? I always say, ask yourself, so what, before you post. Like, why are you posting? So is it educating? Is it inspiring? Is it entertaining? And if it's not doing any of those things, then why are you posting, right? Because it'll just make you stop and think, and it's quality over quantity, right? So again, you're trying to represent your brand, right? You're trying to see on brand, whoever you are, and then everything that you're posting is all about who you are. So I mix in, my personal things with my family, because family is very important to me. I'm a single mom, and I have 2 boys, and I have a boyfriend, and I'm very into fitness, and I volunteer for women because I'm all about empowering women, and so the charity that I volunteer for, I do all their social media, Gems for Gems. It's a charity. If I can do a little plug, it's to help empower women to empower themselves. So it's not a place where women go as a shelter, but it's once they've left an abusive situation, it's helping them get back on their feet through education and scholarships and all these. So it's a brilliant, amazing, it's an amazing charity. So I do all their branding and social media, volunteer, and that's what I do to give back, because I'm very passionate. So everything that I do and who I am, I share. But I stay away from, politics and anything that could potentially create conflict, because that's not the type of person I am. So my advice would be, if for other listeners out there, is be very mindful of, because we're all on social media, and if you want people to, again, fall in love with your brand and connect with you and start to follow you and eventually, hopefully, buy from you, then just think about that. Because I don't know. So I guess I'm curious to know, when you say that, I mean, do you have haters when you're on social media for you?
Yeah.
Because I always find that interesting term. Did you say yes or no?
Yeah, I've had some
Yeah.
over the years. Yeah, I've had a couple.
Well,
Yeah,
you've
and
arrived and I haven't. There you go.
well, no, I think yeah, I think that it depends on the platform. It depends on, what you're using, and also too, like the type of, like you said, the type of content that you're posting. And I
Mhm.
think that, I mean, that's a good point. Like, we know that when we're posting something that might be a little bit controversial, right? Or
You
we know
know.
yeah, exactly. But I'm pretty similar with you in the sense of like, I that's typically not my cup of tea, right? Of posting that type of things, or those types of things. But um every once in a while though, especially YouTube seems to be a place where you can get some anonymous type people that just like to come in and
Yeah.
bash, right?
And Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure, Anyway,
Yep.
it's
Yeah,
I just
for
no, you go
me,
ahead.
okay, so for me, I've always had to just come back to the things that I'm doing, the reasons that I'm posting content, the reasons that I'm building a personal brand or even a business brand are for getting myself to that next level, right? And so I don't care what other people are going to say, or what, whether it's negative or, whoops, I don't care what they're saying about these different things that are happening or that I'm doing, because at the end of the day, I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for their benefit, right? I'm doing it for those that are wanting to hear those, value pieces or whatever it is that I'm sharing,
100%.
not for them.
Again, yeah, because that's because we didn't even talk about this, but finding your niche, right? So when you
Yeah.
find your tribe and you find
Hmm.
like-minded people that share the same values, everything that we talked about, right? Those are the people that are going to follow you and fall in love with your brand, and those are the connections that you're making. So I
Yeah.
agree for sure. I was just saying I've never had anybody post any. I was trying to think like haters because I've heard that term a lot when you have a lot of haters, and I'm like, well, I haven't had any haters, but I don't know. Maybe that's not a good thing. So I'll
Well,
try. No, I'm just kidding.
you'll try to get some of those haters.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I would say too that
or maybe I do, and they're just not vocal. Who
there you
knows, right?
go. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
I would say too, because this is so true, that people that are doing more than you will not say anything negative to you, right? Like people that are, and this is what I mean by that, like people that you might be trying to emulate, or that you're aspiring to achieve the things that they're trying to achieve, right? They're not going to come bash on you making these attempts and trying to post content and trying to, build this brand, because they've been there. They understand the work that it takes. They understand, what you're trying to build and what you're trying to create. They've been in your shoes. So that's something too that, in those moments, I've even had to like tell myself like, okay, it's because maybe they just don't have the same perception or the same alignment that I have to the goals that I'm trying to accomplish, and that's okay. That's okay, right? So yeah, it is an interesting thing. But I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of our clients too that we help on social media or on different platforms, we've got one in particular that they just received their first couple of 1-star reviews on one of the platforms, and it's because there was some controversial content that was posted that they were promoting and going through. But the positive spin on that is that now their audience is even more aligned with their views, with their values, with them being more authentic, right? It's okay to get some of those people that maybe disagree here and there, or that
Yeah.
say, oh, you know what, I'm not about that, I don't agree with that. Okay, great, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you know.
You know what? Actually, this did happen to me recently. So I have a lot of, and I don't want to give any names, but I have a lot of authors that come onto my podcast, and I read their books and I love them. And one of the book I promoted and loved it. And I actually just very recently had somebody private message me and say, I just finished that book and it was horrible. I didn't like it. And And I was like, oh, really? I said, that's interesting. I said, can I ask why? And so she told me why. And I said, okay, well, I said, I loved it, but I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you for reaching out to me. And that was it. So I guess that might have been a hater. I don't know. I mean, but
Yeah.
I respected that she reached out to me privately and told me that. And I didn't want to dismiss her and say, my way or the highway, because I think we're living in such a polarizing time. I hate that. I think we
Right.
should be allowed to have our own opinions and we should respect each other's opinions, and it's okay. So I agree with you. It's okay to have opinions. You don't need to bash someone else. It's not, my way or the highway. It's like, you believe this, I believe this, and let's just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. In fact, like that's in my belief, that's how it should be,
Yeah.
right? It would be a really, really boring world if you just agreed with every single thing that you heard and every single piece
Yeah.
of content that was put in front of you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It doesn't have to be negative. It just means that you disagree.
Hmm.
Move on.
Not everyone's going to like
Yeah,
everything that I like. I know that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like you said, for
exactly.
sure.
Awesome. Okay. So give us we're getting close on time here, so I want to make sure that we have
It's
some
going
time.
so
I know
fast.
that went by
You've
fast.
got
It
two
really did.
talkers here, right? We're both podcast hosts, so it's funny. Okay.
I want to ask one last question here.
Yeah.
What would you say is give us, one important tip, one thing that we can hold on to when considering the brand, whether it is a personal brand or for a company. What would you say is a good, a good tip or advice of making sure that that is a solid brand?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, we've covered a lot of things,
We have.
that are important, figuring out your why and your purpose and all those things. So I think that's really important. I also think you have to be flexible,
Hmm.
because what you might start off and think your brand is might not necessarily be what it actually is. And it goes back to what I said earlier about, you don't really have control over your brand, right? You can decide on a business and you can figure out what your mission is, figure out what your purpose is, write down all these things, or have a think tank with your employees, whether it's one or two or whatever, and discuss all those things and try to figure that out. But it also could change, right? I mean, your purpose could change, or even the route. So I would say just be flexible. Stick to your guns as far as what your passion and what your purpose is, because that's important, right? That should be your North Star, and that should be kind of what drives everything that you do. And then be consistent. I would say be consistent on everything that you do. Once you figure out what your brand is and how you want to work your branding and everything that you want to do with your branding, make sure it's all consistent, like you talked about, at every touch point. So what I mean by that is, you want to make sure, if you're a small business owner and you have whatever 50 employees, 10 employees, whatever, how many employees, it starts internally first. Make sure that you galvanize your employees to buy into what your brand purpose is and what it's all about. Once you get the buy-in from them, they're going to believe it. Then they're going to help execute that externally to get your audience and your consumers to now buy into it. And then make sure your website has the same messaging. And so from a brand identity, make sure consistency, once you pick your colors and your logo, make sure that's consistent everywhere, on your website, on your social media, on your marketing, on your advertising, on your swag. It should all be the same, whatever the color is, whatever the font is, whatever, especially on social media, be consistent, all the touch points. And your customer service is, people forget how important customer service is. And that is a big part of branding, FYI, because branding is, again, all about the experience that your customer is having with your brand. And customer service is huge. And so, a same thing, you want to make sure your customer service represents that, whatever that is, whatever your why is. So make sure you're just constantly being consistent, all the touch points, everything that you're doing. And over time, that's how you're going to build a strong brand. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
it does. Yes, that was incredible. Yes, thank you so much. That was absolutely perfect. And I think you're spot on with that. So important in allowing the flexibility, right? It's okay for it to evolve as long as you're staying aligned with your core purpose, right? It's okay for that to evolve a bit. In fact, it honestly probably should, because you're going to learn more about your your audience. You're going to get in deeper to your mission, you're going to get in deeper to your purpose, and more closely aligned as time goes on. So that's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. Great
Yeah.
advice. All
Thank
right.
you.
Awesome. Jolie, please share with us how we can get in contact with you. How can we find the podcast? Which is pretty easy, guys. You just look it up. But share with us how we get in touch with you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, first of all, I just want to say it has been an absolute joy talking to you. You're so lovely, and I think we're very aligned on a lot of our thinking and everything. So I'm really honored that you invited me to be here today, and it's been so much fun. So
It
thank
has.
you so
Thank
much,
you.
Hillary. It's been great. So you can find me basically. I'm on social media, mostly on Instagram under branding badass. I'm the only one. So it's just branding_badass. And if you're on LinkedIn, and if you're not, I highly recommend you get on there. And under LinkedIn, it's Jolie Goodson. So it's JOELLY. And then Goodson, good GOOD, and then Son, SON on LinkedIn. And then my podcast, it's the only one called Branding Matters. And you just, like you said, you just have to Google it, but it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, it's all over. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I try to, I think you're kind of the same. I try to be educational, but also entertaining. And part of my brand is have fun. And so I try to infuse that into my podcast as well. So it's not just a boring podcast about branding.
That's
So,
incredible.
yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
Seriously,
sorry.
this
One
was
last
such
thing.
fun.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
should
yeah.
mention.
Go ahead.
I don't know if your podcast is visual, but I'm wearing a t-shirt. You can see badass t-shirt. And I made these t-shirts when I started my podcast to promote it. And every time I wore it, I would get people message me and say, "Where did you get your t-shirt? I want one. I want one." So I listened and I deliver. So now you can buy these amazing, soft, lightweight, badass t-shirts. They come in slim fit and relax fit. And you just go to my website. It's brandingbadass.ca. And you'll click on badass merch and you'll find them. And they're going fast. I'm already sold out of the large and the small. So I got to get more. But if you want to go there and get them, they're like so fun.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And seriously, thank you so much for such an incredible conversation.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Marketing Mastermind podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, rate our show, and share with your friends on social media. You can also join our community by visiting us online at marketingmastermindpodcast.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode.